around issues around climate change that we need to respond to. We obviously need to make sure that our economy becomes resilient, and particularly our food systems. And we need to work towards this thing that we call the just transition in order to move from a high emission economy to one that is climate resilient with lower carbon emissions. We must address all the key elements for economic development using science and technology innovation to enable also the private sector and everybody else to create jobs and improve our livelihoods and our society. So with those few words, as the chair of Naci, we welcome you. We hope that over the next few days, between today and tomorrow, we will be engaging around a whole range of issues in terms of science and technology innovation and how these impact on policy and the decisions that we need to make. Let me not take any further and allow the CEO to come in and give us the speech. Dr. Kele. Are you ready? Or is there something? Okay. We've now been able to get the minister. Unfortunately, the minister couldn't be with us physically, but he's joined us online. And he's about to start in terms of giving us his keynote speech. Minister Nzimande, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Good evening, Dr. Shadrack Mpweli. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Let me also take this opportunity to greet the Program Director, Acting Naci CEO, Dr. Mlungi Sicele, our Director General of the Department of Science and Innovation, Dr. Philip Jwaha, Deputy Director Generals present, my special advisors, chairpersons and CEOs of our entities, the entire National Science Innovation fraternity, the invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. I am indeed very pleased to be addressing you this evening in the National Advisory Council on Innovation, STI Policy Forum. Indeed, unfortunately, I couldn't be with you physically, which originally was an opportunity I was looking forward to, also so that myself I could actually be able to network with all the distinguished participants. Naci is a leading advisory body to government on science, technology, and innovation to support well-coordinated, responsive, and functioning national system of innovation. Naci is established to provide evidence-based advice to me as the minister, broadly on science, technology, and innovation matters, and through the research expertise and stakeholder engagement. This policy colloquium is aimed at all stakeholders within our national system of innovation to engage on the role that science, technology, and innovation should or must play to make the lives of our people better by creating an inclusive society and particularly an inclusive economy. I therefore thank the Naci board, the management, and my department for organizing this groundbreaking Naci Inaugural Policy Colloquium. Ladies and gentlemen, Program Director, September marks Public Service Month in South Africa, which encompasses Heritage Day, Tourism Month, and the Police Commemoration Day to remember the fallen heroes and heroines in blue. This month serves as a reminder of what it means to serve communities and to also look at the impact the government has, especially around issues of provision of services. For us, in the National System of Innovation, we need to interrogate ourselves on what ought to be our role in making the lives of our people better, especially now post the COVID-19 pandemic. We need to interrogate the role that science, technology, and innovation, STI, can play in the creation and development of a circular economy as part of a just transition to support sustainable livelihoods. I believe that together in this policy or through this policy colloquium, we will reflect on our progress in implementing our STI policies, and at the end of the colloquium, hopefully to move closer to a common understanding of the work that confronts all of us. During the February 2022 State of the Nation address, President Cyril Ramaphosa emphasized that, I quote, "We are working together to revitalize our economy and end the inequality and injustice that impedes our progress," unquote. The president here highlighted the need for a new social compact between government, business, social partners, and communities to grow the economy while reinforcing critical areas of focus that include, firstly, overcoming the COVID-19 pandemic, secondly, a massive rollout of infrastructure, thirdly, a substantial increase in local production, fourthly, an employment stimulus to create jobs and support livelihoods, and fifthly, rapid expansion of the country's energy generation capacity. I do need to indicate that none of these things actually can be fully achieved without science, technology, and innovation being at the center of this very agenda that was articulated by the president here. Let me also indicate that to further enhance coherence of the national system of innovation, at a system level, we have established the standing ministerial level STI structure, which I'm chairing as the Minister of Science and Innovation. The ministerial STI structure, which comprises the relevant science, technology, innovation intensive departments, the chairpersons of the government clusters, National Treasury, and the Department of Planning, Monitoring, and Evaluation. The committee will focus on setting a high-level public agenda for the NSI, approving decadal plans on innovation for South Africa, committing public resources to research and innovation, and reviewing reports on the performance of the National System of Innovation over 3-year cycles. Furthermore, the ministerial science, technology, innovation structure will lead government in ensuring that the environment for innovation is indeed optimal. Under the guidance of the ministerial STI structure, a whole of society innovation approach is promoted to ensure that the various policies that affect innovation are aligned, establishing in effect a South African innovation compact and a South African innovation ecosystem. As a department, we'll be working with the Presidency and National Treasury to facilitate the integration of the STI agenda and plans into government planning under the auspices of this ministerial STI structure. This, most importantly, will also include better alignment of STI budgets across government. To ensure that STI enjoys the required support and stature across government and society, an annual Science, Technology, Innovation STI plenary will be convened by the President. This STI plenary convened by the President annually will include business, government, academia, and civil society. And this plenary will serve as a collaborative platform. The ministerial STI structure will present its high-level STI plans and broad investment strategy for South Africa, as well as report on progress with priority national STI initiatives. that will then be taken also for discussion by the National System of Innovation partners that will be brought together through the presidential plenary. Also in this plenary, as I have said, all stakeholders will participate. The National System of Innovation partners will use this STI plenary to collaboratively reflect on progress with STI initiatives, strategize to address challenges, make recommendations on actions required, and jointly commit resources for the recommended initiatives. As we may know, science knows no borders. We will continue to strengthen our international research and cooperation efforts, particularly on the implementation of the BRICS framework research activities, the STI initiatives targeting the objectives of the SADC Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan, and the initiatives targeting the objectives of Agenda 2063. Also, I need not remind you that in December this year, we will be hosting the World Science Forum, which will be hosted in Cape Town and for the first time ever on the African continent. Another important matter that I would urge that you reflect upon in your colloquium is that of the absolute necessity to identify and mobilize resources, or to talk about strategies to mobilize resources for research, development, and innovation in the African continent, in line with the priorities and challenges facing our continent. My argument essentially is that we cannot be able to advance most of our research, science, technology, and innovation goals as a continent unless we have our own resources to fund research, so that we are less dependent on donor-driven funding. Because often, with donor-driven funding, the agenda is set by the donors and not necessarily advancing an African agenda. For example, the African Union has adopted what is known as Agenda 2063. We need to be asking ourselves the question, what's the science, technology, and innovation component for that Agenda 2063 to be realized? And in order to answer that question, we actually need to have our own sources of funding that we need to creatively identify in order to pursue an African agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, the year 2019 ushered in a new era for the department with the approval by Cabinet of the 2019 White Paper on Science, Technology, and Innovation. This document is now the principal policy guiding South Africa's national system of innovation and commits the country to furthering the role of STI in economic and social development, emphasizing the core themes of inclusivity, transformation, and partnerships for an innovating society and economy. By the way, that's part of the reason why the theme for the World Science Forum in South Africa, which we have advanced, is Science for Social Justice. Now, the Decadal Plan will be the main platform through which we pursue this national science and innovation agenda. And the Decadal Plan 2021 to 2031 is our roadmap for driving STI and policy programs over the next 10 years. The Decadal Plan is aligned to our National Development Plan and is informed by the important South Africa Foresight exercise for STI 2030, which was carried out by yourselves as Naci. As you might know, Cabinet approved the Decadal Plan in March 2021 for implementation. And this is now providing a kind of a master plan that should foster interdepartmental collaboration, primarily with the Departments of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, Mineral Resources and Energy, Health and Trade Competition. Ladies and gentlemen and Program Director, our departmental STI initiatives cut across the three phases of the South African Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, the ERR. And that includes the following: engage and preserve, which includes a comprehensive health response to save lives, and kept the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. Recovery and reform, which includes interventions to restore the economy while controlling the health risks. And reconstruct and transform, which entails building a sustainable, resilient, and inclusive economy. Our department is focusing on the role of science and innovation in the ERRP, specifically on the innovation response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and on leveraging long-term investment in South African RDI over the years to support economic reconstruction and recovery, mainly in 4 areas: the revitalization of existing sectors and industries, the exploitation of new sources of economic growth, the building of a capable state, and support for broad-based education and skills development. Key amongst these is the department's contribution to ensuring energy security. For example, in February this year, I launched the Hydrogen Society Roadmap for South Africa, which guides the country in creating new growth sectors while transitioning to a carbon neutral economy. At the same time, work continues modernizing existing sectors like mining through support for research and development, both to ensure a safer working environment for miners and to increase the lifespan of mining, which still remains the backbone of our economy in South Africa still at this point in time. The implementation of high-tech industrialization processes using advanced manufacturing to increase economic competitiveness also remains our key priority. Program Director, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished participants, let me now just try and focus briefly on our interventions in the STI to create an enabling environment for an inclusive economy, growth of that economy, as well as its development, including the comprehensive social development of our country. Agriculture and food security. Through the implementation of the Agricultural Bioeconomy Innovation Partnership Program, APIP, our department is in support for agricultural research and the introduction of smart agriculture technologies in a bid to ensure food security and modernize agriculture. With animal disease outbreaks impacting heavily on economic growth, we have also increased our support for research and development in veterinary research to tackle foot and mouth disease, amongst others, and also to support agro-processing and its value chain. As I have already indicated, we are also focusing on modernizing mining. The joint public-private research, development, and innovation partnership between the Minerals Council of South Africa and the DSI and the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition continues to deliver technological solutions that help to increase the competitiveness of mining in South Africa, especially deep-level mining. We also provide, as DSI, support to the mining equipment manufacturers of South Africa. Our other intervention in the economy is that of seeking to modernize manufacturing. We continue to support such initiatives for modernization, particularly the development of additive manufacturing, that is 3D printing technologies. Our intention is to make sure that these initiatives mature and are incorporated into manufacturing value chain in South Africa. Another spin-off of this work is the establishment with DSI funding of the MedEd project, which has brought together small businesses and the Central University's University of Technology's Center for Rapid Prototyping and Manufacturing to manufacture medical devices. As a department, we will continue, I'm pleased to say, to optimize investment into materials development through an increased emphasis on the industrialization of mature technologies and align this to the decadal plan. We're also quite active on health innovation, especially focusing on post-COVID recovery. While COVID-19 persists, our government managed to contain the pandemic through a combination of public awareness and the vaccination campaign. And indeed, we mobilized science on a day-to-day basis, which even led, for instance, to the KwaZulu-Natal research project, CRISP, to be able to identify the very first ever new variant of COVID-19. Our efforts were supplemented in 2021 when the World Health Organization announced that the World Health Organization and its Co2x partners were working with a South African consortium comprising Afrigen, Biologics and Vaccines, a network of universities, the South African Medical Research Council, and the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to establish the first ever COVID-19 mRNA vaccine technology transfer hub for the continent. To reduce South Africa's dependence on imports, the DSI and the Medical Research Council and our Technology Innovation Agency, we also led an initiative to respond to the local and continental demand for testing by setting up a fund to develop COVID-19 diagnostic tools. We also, as a result, developed 2 diagnostic tests that were actually endorsed, approved by the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. Partnerships between the CSIR and Cape Bio resulted in the successful production of a polymerase chain reaction COVID-19 diagnostic test kit, also approved by SAPRA. Producing these kits locally remains strategic so that we begin to build our own self-sufficiency in South Africa and the continent in order to be able to deal with this imbalance in the provision of medical services and technologies. Also, our science, over and above these economic interventions, our science initiatives also aim to support a capable state with a particular focus on the district development model and also supporting women and youth empowerment. As the Department of Science and Innovation, we have embraced the presidentially led district development model as a platform to enable innovation in districts and to deploy innovation and technology solutions to our district and metropolitan municipalities. We continue to prioritize women and youth and to mainstream them in our work. For instance, to ensure capacity building and economic opportunities, young people from TVET colleges are receiving training as part of the projects under the Hydrogen Society Roadmap, which we launched earlier this year. Flagship initiatives like the National Science Week, Grassroots Innovation, and Living Labs continue to attract thousands of learners and members of the public to, amongst others, workshops and science shows at schools, universities, and science centers countrywide. This includes the very important South African Women in Science Award. Through the Innovation for Service Delivery program, funded in partnership with the EU and our National Treasury, our Department of Science and Innovation continues to pilot technologies and innovations to improve the delivery of basic services in municipalities within the framework of the district development model. In partnership with the South African Local Government Association, we have expanded the number of municipalities participating in the Municipal Innovation Maturity Index. This is a very important index because this digital tool provides critical information on the innovation capabilities and readiness of local government to adopt innovation and technology. My philosophy and approach is that innovation is everywhere, at the highest level of science and practitioners, as well as at grassroots level and in localities. We need to develop an NSI system that is able to harness innovation wherever it occurs in our country. On climate change, responsiveness, and new sources of growth, research and development activities in urban and spatial planning by the department's entities such as the CSIR, the National Space Agency, and universities are critical as the country plans its future human settlements. As a department, we continue to invest significantly in R&D that builds the adaptive capacity and resilience of key sectors to climate change. This is done through the implementation of the DSI-led Global Change Research Plan for South Africa and associated programs and interventions. The Risk and Vulnerability Science Centers continue to play a crucial role in building the capabilities of rural-based universities to engage effectively in global change research to identify and profile local environmental risks and vulnerabilities. There's another important matter, by the way, that in your own colloquium, please also do reflect, how do we try to bridge this vast gap between more advanced universities in South Africa and our historically disadvantaged institutions? Science, in fact, and scientific practice can act as a very important gap to overcome these inequalities that we inherited from apartheid, and which are still with us, unfortunately. Just on the Hydrogen Platinum Valley project, I also wish to say that the first phase of this initiative, a feasibility study was launched in partnership with Anglo-American, Bambili Energy, and Engie in October 2021. The Hydrogen Valley corridor will cover 3 hubs with a high concentration of hydrogen demand and access to green hydrogen, 1 in Johannesburg hub, 1 in Mogalakwena, Limpopo, and 1 in Durban, Richards Bay. In terms of socio-economic benefits for South Africans, the implementation of the South African Hydrogen Valley Corridor could create between 14,000 to 30,000 direct and indirect jobs per year by 2030, and also contribute billions of rands into our economy. To facilitate the implementation of the Platinum Valley Initiative, as a department, we signed a memorandum of understanding with SASOL, the Gauteng Department of Economic Development, and the Central Energy Fund, aimed at promoting potential investments and scaling up the 9 catalytic projects identified and embedding transformation in the hydrogen economy landscape. We are also focusing on the Co2x initiative. Given the abundance of coal in South Africa and the high emissions resulting from its extensive use in energy generation, a just transition to a green economy is a priority, with coal progressively replaced by cleaner sources of energy. We have initiated this Co2x project, which aims to develop technologies to reduce emissions from coal-fired boilers in the cement, energy, steel, and paper and pulp industries. A combination of locally developed and international technologies will be used to capture and convert flue gas components, carbon dioxide, sulfur oxides, and nitrogen oxides into commercial products like fertilizer, green ammonia, and sulfuric acid, combining the flue gas components with green hydrogen. To date, as the DSI, I wish to say that we have invested 50 million rands towards this project, which also allowed local small, medium, and micro enterprises to put in place partnerships to demonstrate the flue gas conversion technology at the PPC cement plant in the current financial year. Chairperson and distinguished participant, another important area that I can't end without talking about is research, development, and innovation for the circular economy. The DSI is developing a roadmap for STI for a circular economy in the coming year in response to the white paper on STI. The roadmap will complement the work being done by the Department of Forestry, Fisheries, and the Environment in stimulating technological transformation of the waste economy, and by the Department of Trade, Industry, and Competition in integrating circular principles into the sector master plans. The most important thing is that our roadmap will enable a shift towards a circular economy characterized by eco-innovation, a low-carbon economy, resource efficiency, the bioeconomy, and environmental technology. That's why also we are investing money into research in the circular economy, which we have developed through a project we have developed with the Water Research Commission to improve the governance of strategic water source areas. We have also set up the South African Risk and Vulnerability Atlas as a decision support tool for municipalities to assist with planning for climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, Program Director, South Africa will continue to build our national system of innovation and knowledge generation through the Square Kilometer Array, the DSI-funded National Integrated Cyber Infrastructure System, and through the National Policy Data Observatory, which we established as part of our fight against COVID-19. Through our National Space Agency, we have been developing space capability in operational space weather over the past 10 years. Given the current move towards 4IRs, this national program will allow for the future domestic and regional mitigation of the vulnerabilities caused by space weather events impacting the Internet of Things, for instance. We have also invested, I'm pleased to say, over 30 million rand in the Maritime Domain Awareness Cube satellite constellation development. To respond adequately through the decadal plan, we have identified 6 foundational digital domains through our information and communications technology roadmap on which South Africa should focus its resources for the next 10 years. Namely, and this is very important, artificial intelligence, robotics and cybernetics, augmented, virtual and mixed reality, modeling and simulation, blockchain and cybersecurity, the Internet of Things, cloud to edge computing and networking, as well as quantum computing. Investment in these domains will enable STI to provide opportunities for new sources of economic and social development. We have also drafted a foundational digital capabilities research program in collaboration with the Center for Scientific and Industrial Research to refocus efforts on building foundational capabilities in these 6 identified domains. As a department, we are also leading the open science policy development process by setting out the vision and rules of the game with the support of the DSI-convened Open Science Advisory Board. The board and experts are tasked with ensuring that the South African open science policy is based on high-quality data and solid policy advice. I can assure you today that our draft open science policy is in line with the definition, values, principles, and actions as outlined in the 2021 UNESCO recommendation on open science. Program Director, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I wish to say that having outlined all these activities, which I thought it's important that I do so in order also to contribute some flesh and meat into the discussions of this colloquium, I must, however, say I'm also looking forward to the outcomes of the deliberations from your colloquium, especially in guiding us on our arduous journey of ensuring that we position our science, technology, and innovation system at the center of our economic development, job creation, and the eradication of poverty in our country and continent. With these words, I wish you all the best. I wish you a successful engagement, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. We have appreciated the presentation that you have given to us. I'm sure the team has very, very carefully taken note of your remarks and some of the guidance that you have given to us in terms of what we need to pay attention to for this particular colloquium. Ladies and gentlemen, Minister, part of the reason for us to have this particular colloquium is that we know, even some of my colleagues who are members of Naci, people keep asking, what exactly do you do at Naci? In a lot of different ways. And some of that has actually spurred us as Naci to begin to think about putting together this particular colloquium, which at least helps us to have a bit of a discussion at a broader level so people could begin to understand what is required for our science and technology innovation system to transform the economy to where we want it to be, but also for Naci to demonstrate its contribution within the national system of innovation. I am not going to summarize the speech and the presentation of the minister. It is being recorded. We will use it as part and parcel of the colloquium and beyond. But for now, let us take a minute to say thank you to Minister and appreciate his contribution to this particular colloquium. With those few words, I would appreciate, colleagues, if we could, for those who are here in the room, if we could take about 10 to 15 minutes to get the food before it gets cold. And then from there, we'll have the presentation by our acting CEO, so we understand what Naci is all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
particular context and gives people a sense of what Naci is all about and what we've been trying to do. Naci, its mandate, if I were to make it very simple, is to simply to generate advice on science and technology innovation and how that impacts on society, and present that to those that need to make policy decisions. We have a very skeletal staff. We work largely through experts that are not employees of Naci, that are in a variety of different institutions, but some of them are also in the private sector. They contribute a lot of their intellectual know-how and their time. And for that, we appreciate quite a lot, because it helps us also when we're doing our consultative sessions of our roundtable stakeholder interactions, that we learn what works and what doesn't work, but we collect even more insights of how to get ourselves there. We believe it's probably one of the best models around which we generate some of this advice, because before we even present that advice to the policymakers, we actually do go out and consult with the relevant stakeholders to get a sense as to the applicability and the ability to implement such advice. So without further ado, let me allow our CEO, Dr. Mlungisi Cele, to give us an overview of Naci's performance in this particular space within the context of its mandate. You will notice that we have switched roles between the CEO and myself. Ordinarily, this would have been the job of the chair, but we thought it important that enough that perhaps him being the CEO, he could actually even give in a lot more meat than the overview that the CEO would give. Over to you, Dr. Cele.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. So if South Africa was not, I nearly used the word, Dr. Jamin, we are not yet bankrupt, right? That maybe I was not going to get a bonus. So, the good words from my chairperson then assures me that DG, you need to review your assessment of my performance. Let's start on slide 2. Ladies and gentlemen, the chairperson has welcomed all of you, but maybe let me extend my sincere appreciation to the minister, the chairperson, members of NECI Council, the Director General, deputies, Director Generals, some CEOs, chairpersons of councils, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and our colleagues who are helping us with food, and the sound system. And also those who couldn't join us in person, who are sitting in their comforts of their homes. We are grateful that you have taken some time to join us. As the chair has indicated, it's a council's presentation. So my task is to communicate what the council sought to, but if I add my own or highlights or italics, I'll take full responsibility. I thought one should start with this, or remind us about what Chief Albert Ntuli said at the occasion where he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And there are two reasons why I thought this slide is important. No, it's not so much what he said, which we can all read. But the first one, Chair and DG and the minister, is to say that our forefathers in Africa, they long recognized the role that science and I add innovation can play in improving the quality of life and the well-being of people. But the question that I've asked myself is what has gone wrong? From 1961, decades later, DG, we have struggled to try and convince colleagues in various sectors of society that science, technology, and innovation is as important as delivering water services, electrification, human settlements, and so forth. We have long recognized, and this extract just demonstrates that. But secondly, this sends a very strong message that Africans, they understood that you need to combine all forms of knowledge if you want to see progress in the continent. Professor Jonas Seleti, sometimes the myth that Africans, they didn't have science decades ago or ages ago probably is not correct. And I suspect this is partly the reason why Chief Albert Tool was able to articulate this view. So colleagues, if you stay with me, because this is a start, this appreciation of the role of science in enhancing human life and development, because it's a running theme throughout the tenure of Council and the various initiatives that Council has been able to deliver. Let's move to the second one. This session, or what I've been asked to do, it's a reflection. Council wants to share its own reflection of what it has been able to deliver or not deliver. Colleagues, it's not an evaluation. So I want to make it clear that it's not an evaluation, because an independent institutional review is yet to be conducted. Every 5 years, we've got to do it. Get external experts who will tell us whether we were able to achieve what we are set out to do or not. The minister has already asked that Council conducts its own self-evaluation, which it has done, and Professor Anastasia Porris helped us with that. So, but this is not evaluation, which has to be independent. It's a reflection. It's a reflection that recognizes that this Council was appointed during a particular period, which is a pre-COVID period. But it evolved and continues to implement its work during COVID, which continues to impact on our lives and has worsened the triple crisis, as some would refer to the economic, the environmental, and social reproduction crises, which have become worse as a consequence of COVID. And tomorrow we're going to have a session that will be dealing with this aspect of COVID and the role of science and how do we prepare ourselves for future pandemics, so that colleagues will begin to appreciate why some of the sessions were put for tomorrow. But we also recognize that during the tenure of Council, something quite significant happened, that the two departments were brought under one ministry. The Department of Higher Education and Training and the Departments of Science and Innovation. At some point, we thought of doing some conceptual work in terms of unpacking what does this measure mean as Naci, but yeah, it's still an outstanding task, but maybe others have been able to do. But nevertheless, we feel that this is a significant factor in our broader ecosystem that has to be considered in terms of what opportunities and challenges it presents. The third dimension, of course, is a broader science, technology, and innovation policy mix. So those who are familiar with the STI policy or lingo will understand what we are trying to, what is meant by STI policy mix. And I'm very glad that, as we'll demonstrate, that Naci has been able to contribute in reviewing and renewing this policy mix. So we think the colloquium therefore creates, as we conduct this reflection, an opportunity to share as Naci, but also to learn from you about a range of other possibilities. Whether we're talking about policy renewal, deepening, and responsiveness, or system or an institutional building, whether, as the minister alluded or indicated in his speech, that we are pursuing an STI enabling inclusive and sustainable economic development. Our chairperson, in his introductory remarks, also shared with you what Naci has attempted to do, especially in relation to the last point. Let's move to the next slide. This is just a formality, colleagues, to remind colleagues that Naci is a statutory body. This is a mandate. We are expected to advise the minister, and through the minister, now we need to replace Mr. Scott, but that's how the Act reads, and cabinet on the role and contribution of science, mathematics, innovation, technology, including indigenous technologies in promoting and achieving national objectives. And then it sets out, the legislation then sets out a number of functions, which I'm inviting you to go and read in the legislation. And when you read those functions, you'll realize that Naci is probably a giant that should be awakened. And if it had all what it took, a lot could have been done. Let's move to the next one. So let's move to the next slide. I thought it's just to remind colleagues, this is what we call the South Africa's problematic. The minister and others would have, but it's important for us because it gives us a sense of what informs our thinking process. That it's important to remind ourselves that South Africa remains a project. We remain a construction site for a constitutional democracy based on principles of non-racialism, non-sexism, ethical leadership, but also seeking to develop a developmental and capable state. But two things which most of you are familiar with is that the character of the South African economy has not changed fundamentally and is stubbornly refusing to grow fast enough to create jobs. And our society is characterized or has a social deficit, which if expressed in Gini coefficient terms, you can see the yawning gap between the rich and poor. And we have a highly racial and gendered poverty. Consequently, just to summarize, if you were to characterize South African society, you could say that it is on the one hand an uneven and unequal development and an increasing demand for a better life and well-being on the other. This is the South African situation, the way we understand it as Naci. But the question we have been posing ourselves is what should be the role of science, technology, and innovation in intervening in this particular, let's move to the next slide. This slide, most of you might have seen it. It just summarizes the broader context within which we've been doing our work at a global level, just to remind ourselves of the SDGs, which we are all expected to contribute towards. They have been threatened, as experts have warned us, by COVID, or our fight at least for the realization of those goals. And then we have the National Development Plan drivers. Padile Khutla here, my friend, has expressed very strong views about NDP and so forth. And I'm glad he could join us. But the intention is, Naci always, because it's located, our task, it's about policy for, we have to provide advice based on the notion of policy for science. Compared to science, I think that's Himmler. Himmler would look at science, science for policy, right, Himmler? Yeah. But we principally on the other, and our advice, of course, what would differentiate us with the academy is that ours remains confidential. But we have to appreciate the context, the policy context, in order to give effect to our advice. Because if we don't appreciate this broader context, the possibility of advice being taken into consideration gets hammered. Let's move to the next one, and it'll be a bit faster. It's just a reminder, colleagues, because part of our responsibility as Naci is to do environmental scanning. And the white paper has actually given that responsibility to Naci, that we have to assist doing this mega trends analysis. But these are some of the mega trends that I suppose very few people may disagree with us on, which are confronting the world and South Africa in particular, and which we've been trying to pay attention to. Let's move to the next one. Next slide. The slide seeks to summarize what I referred to earlier as policy mix. And most of you contributed towards this. Let's move to the next one, because then that's where we need to focus, Isaiah. So what we are sharing with you, colleagues, is what the council has been able to do in the last 4 years, considering the trajectory or the context that we've sought to paint and the opportunities and challenges. That we were asked by the minister to advise him on the establishment of the Sovereign Innovation Fund. We have done that. We were also asked to review the National Research and Development Strategy and the 10-year innovation plan with the purpose of informing the decadal plan that the minister referred to. Again, this was done with the support of a lot of you who are sitting in this room. The white paper assigns Naci the responsibility to develop the NSI M&E framework, of course, working with stakeholders. We have done that. So we have given the department the framework. We were asked, but also it's part of our legislated function, to help identify priorities for the future. We undertook South African Foresight exercises for STI, and we'll spend a bit of time on it, but without. And we completed this exercise. Again, the minister indicated what happened to this, and you might have also seen maybe the DG's presentation on the decadal plan about this work. But we are also asked to advise on the framework for the development of the decadal plan for the system. The minister also said that South Africa is trying to establish a national health insurance. Please advise on the type of role that NSI could potentially play. That work is underway. But we have involved a number of stakeholders. So the next council should be able to finalize that work so that we can then share the outcome. The STI indicators report, which the chairperson alluded to, is our flagship project. And I'm pleased that Dr. Zachamin, who used to lead this work during his tenure as a council member forever, he could join us. We continue to expand and learn from a range of stakeholders in terms of how this flagship project could be enhanced and become a truly authoritative state or terms of, or a reference point if someone wanted to understand where the NSI is and and its performance and so forth. But again, given the integration of the two departments, the minister said to us, I appreciate this report that you give me. Is it possible to get a sense whether in respect of TVET colleges, do we know the state of innovation in TVET colleges? So with the support of, Michael and others, last year we were able to conduct an exploratory study, which produced about 25 indicators that could potentially be utilized to collect data and produce this report. So we're now in a phase where we are validating inverted commas, those indicators, and consulting different stakeholders so that we are quite certain about whether those sets of indicators, do we have data, are we able to analyze and generate? But ultimately, we don't want these reports to be produced separately. We want to have one report that will contain all key sets of indicators that could give us a comprehensive picture about how our system is performing. So, but we have done the exploratory study. I'm pleased there are some colleagues from TVET colleges who are sitting in this room. Let's move to the next slide. Now, maybe this is important, colleagues. the two initiatives that I mentioned, the review of the NRDS and 10-year innovation plan and Foresight, they've contributed, at least, Chair, we can claim, in the presence of the DG, but because you see, he can't respond. But we have to claim that our work has contributed in informing at least the priorities that the decadal plan has set for South Africa. But you'll also notice, colleagues, that the orientation, not just of the decadal plan, but of the white paper. And maybe DG, that's where we would give you something to be cheerful about. That where, both the white paper and the decadal plan are strongly emphasizing the role of STI or the power of STI in bringing about inclusive and sustainable socio-economic development. And we are aware that some in the system raised one of the criticism leveled against these two policies was that, the emphasis seemed to be shifting from science system or research system to, greater emphasis or bias towards the socio-economic development. So if you want to blame anyone for that shift or a stronger emphasis, please don't blame the DG and the department. Chair, I think they should blame us. Because when we reviewed the 1996 white paper and the performance of NSI, those reports are available. We're very clear that our system since 1994 has not benefited to a greater extent or has not delivered or not met the needs of the majority. So those reviews have said a new white paper or decadal plan must have a very strong social responsiveness dimension. So it's not surprising that the new white paper in the decadal plan are an attempt to respond to that question. So, and then when we set out the Foresight exercise, because some criticized us, but tell us what technologies do you want South Africa to pursue? Because that's typically what Foresight exercises. We said, let's draw lessons from the 1998 Foresight, but let's look at where the world is moving. Our emphasis, colleagues, was not on producing a set of technologies or recommending a set of technologies that South Africa must prioritize, but our starting point was, what are the societal challenges that the national system of innovation should respond to? That was our starting point. And using that, we then framed how the Foresight exercise should proceed. But we also recognize that our country, as I've indicated earlier on, that it was facing very real challenges. Our economy wasn't growing. Millions of people were joblessness or were unemployed, and others were languishing in poverty. So you needed to design a Foresight exercise that could respond in the short to medium and lay the basis for a long-term policy intervention. So that's how the Foresight exercise which we conducted was framed. Let's move to the next one. So that we will encourage you to go to our website to get fuller details of the Foresight exercise reports. But on the left side, you will see the Foresight outcomes, about 9 in our report, we refer to them as domains. That's what that Foresight exercise produced. So the other columns were added by the department. So, and you would have seen, and tomorrow the decadal plan is going to be presented. And then, so the department will explain the logic of what has happened from the Foresight exercise to the ultimate priorities and societal grand challenges in the decadal plan. But appreciate the areas that the Foresight exercise produced. And I was pleased, Anastasius, when I think you participated in the Saudi Arabia, Foresight exercise, because again, we have to study what's happening globally. We're quite pleased that most of priorities that both developed and emerging economies were focusing on were similar to what we're pursuing, or at least our own Foresight exercise had produced. At least that gave us a sense of comfort that we're not far from, from the mark. Let's move to the next slide. So again, this is the basis. So when the three criteria that we use to select or shortlist the priorities that ended up being 9, it had to meet 3 conditions. That the proposal needed to demonstrate potential for new impact. It should have considered global and local STI trends and should demonstrate potential towards socio-economic development. And so those were the 3 criteria that we use, which resulted in the 9 domains that the Foresight exercise proposed. Let's move to the next slide. So before I talk about this one, let me just indicate, colleagues, there were 2 things. OECD invited us a few months ago. They organized a webinar. They were looking at Foresight, STI policy and the future. In South Africa, our Foresight exercise was identified as having some unique contribution that it was making globally. 2 things. Number 1, it utilized the big data, which we assisted by colleagues from the High School of Economics in Moscow, because they have the capability. So when we needed to do Foresight and I had to travel across the world, eventually everywhere I went, I was referred to Moscow because they have that capability. And those colleagues, most of you participated in that process and were here when we launched. So that was the first thing, the uniqueness of the Foresight exercise, the deployment of big data analytics. But the second one, DG, which we need to, and the ministry, we need to appreciate here, is that, and they accept, across, people said, you were quite successful in that there was an immediate uptake or utilization of your Foresight results by policymakers. And they said that's the big challenge that most countries experience. So we were then asked, how did you do it? So I'm spending time, colleagues, on these things so that sometimes, we are too harsh on ourselves as South Africans, even when we engage with our partners globally, to an extent that we are not even able to share lessons. So this is one of the lessons that global community has appreciated, and they continue to ask us. So as a consequence, there's a book coming based on the Foresight exercise, because we asked that you need to share these lessons globally. And And then the big data analytics, it's a capability that we need to develop. So now the second thing I want to, it refers, we've spoken about the STI indicators report. We have our own South African Innovation Scorecard. It's got those elements that, as you can realize, we continue to improve. The only one that's missing, and we accept, is sustainability, which we need to conceptualize and then add in terms of the impacts. Let's move to the next slide. Now, I thought that in addition to what the chair said, just take this slide, and you have seen it. Most of you know it better than some of us, but the intention is not to repeat what the slide is saying to you, but to share what Naci has done since. Because as council, we said, we can't always be reminding South Africans that our investment in R&D as a percentage of GDP is not moving, is not progressing positively towards the 1.5 target by 2030 or a revised target by 2020. We're moving in the opposite direction. So he said other people, they can keep telling these figures, but our task as the advisory body is to deepen our understanding of why is this the case. And we looked at the various components and realized that business has a lot to do, especially the business expenditure on R&D, which is moving in the opposite direction. And Dr. Jamin, you started reporting about these things. And we said, we need to understand what's going on. And we've asked Professor Dave Kaplan to spend some time looking at this issue around business. And tomorrow, we have set some time to engage on that question. So there's a paper that has been drafted and discussed with few experts, because we must understand what's going on in that business environment, so that ultimately we appreciate why business expenditure on R&D is not moving in the right direction, so that ultimately we can advise government what is it that needs to be done. So this is what Naci Council is doing, and this is why we have a session tomorrow, colleagues, to engage on this question. It's been said over time, but this time around, Naci says, let's have a serious discussion. The next. The minister alluded to this. Naci has been, we're grateful, Director General and government and the minister, that you have considered Naci to have a critical role to play in the two structures that have been set out by government, the IMC and the Presidential Council. The chair indicated we have already made a presentation last year at the Inaugural IMC. And again, we invite colleagues to engage with the presentation that we made, Chair, with your permission, because we looked at China and South Korea, and the question was simple, going back to my first slide. What did these countries do to ensure that in their development trajectory, STI also had a role to play? And we shared our analysis with our leaders. when the plenary is set out again, will be expected to continuously play a critical role. So we're just sharing with colleagues what Naci has been able to do and invite you to engage. But of course, there's a lot that will have to happen because these structures in themselves are not meant, they are not means to an end. The bigger question they're seeking to address is the issue of coherence and coordination, which existed in 1994 and continues to exist, but it's not a peculiar South African problem. You talk to all advisory councils. Okay. Yeah, maybe as such, I mean, I haven't said something. Yeah, so I can't claim sabotage. Maybe I mentioned Moscow and some people who may be listening were irritated. It's fine. So let's move to the next slide because we are almost done, colleagues. So I was saying that the two structures that have been set out through the white paper are just means to an end. And that end is about creating a well-coordinated and responsive NSR. So the third dimension is around funding, which is a useful lever to steer the system. I think the minister spoke to this one. Now, I'm pleased as well that Godfrey Mashamba, the Deputy Director General in the Presidency, started some work on setting up the budget coordination model. Is now here. So maybe Godfrey, now you are close to your proximity to the leadership may help us to fast track this. So Naci, this is one of the areas, colleagues, we must confess we haven't started work because it's a new, but that's what Naci will be expected to do going forward. So again, DG, when you write those letters to entities and you don't include budget coordination, they must not come back and accuse you why Naci is being preferred. You just simply refer them to the slide that Naci is, has this particular role. And then when you start seeing your budget being cut, because that's what we'll have to advise government. If you submit a bid that is not talking to national priorities, Chair, an empowered Naci should boldly be able to say to National Treasury, but that request and that bid shouldn't be considered. So that's where Naci is going. Let's move to the next one. I mean, this is another set of contributions that Naci Council has been able to make. The first sets you would have realized they are more towards informing policy, making interventions at a policy level. Now these ones, they're responding to particular challenges that South Africa is confronted with, but also they are helping the system to respond. We have one of our functions is also, it's around international cooperation and relations. So we have produced a report whose intention is to identify how at the regional level or even continental level, we could use renewable energy and so forth to improve the socio-economic development challenges of the region. This report was widely consulted with stakeholders. Again, it's available for people to realize. I'll share one slide that's emerging out of that report. The second one, Council finalized the research report. We'll be finalizing the advice in 2 weeks' time, and it's going to come to the minister. So, given the energy security challenge, we think that this work will contribute a lot. Already, the stakeholders who participated in the study, they've been asking us to participate. Some they want the report, but we say, wait, we haven't finalized because we need to give the minister. The president did, in one of the speeches not so long ago, refer to energy storage. So we will encourage colleagues, once the report is released, to look at it, to engage with it, and see whether there is any contribution that this report is making towards addressing the energy challenges that we're facing. The third one, it has taken long, but it's got 3 dimensions, including the technology balance of payment. But we also look, we've conducted econometrics analysis. The idea to look at the value and the contribution of imported technologies. I think part of what we're trying to do is a concern that has been raised about business involvement in the NSI and whether our work tends to be biased towards the science and technology system, and and when it comes to the innovation side or the private sector side, we haven't been. So again, the focus of this study is it's may be helpful to us understanding what is it that can be done utilizing technologies as we trying to address some of the economic challenges, and whether indeed it's useful to import technologies and the impact. And of course, the debate is whether we should be importing more technologies or trying to indigenize, or you need a combination, right? And then we looked and produced a report and advice on water security. We all know about this challenge in South Africa. So that report is available. We submitted advice on what needs to be done. The next one, it's taking us longer to get to what we're trying to do, but it's essentially, the minister alluded to it. Again, we're trying to look at how STI can intervene in growing our economy, whether through industrialization, manufacturing, and so forth, and how, if so, how that should happen. We're at an early stage of that process. But Naci has also been involved in pursuing the transformation of NSI agenda. Last month, we hosted a webinar where we relaunched the women participation in STEM, but we have broadened that we are looking at different dimensions. We're working with different stakeholders. And then some years back, we were asked to set up the National STI Information and Data Portal. That work is under construction. And as soon as it's finalized, we will open But we are grateful to universities. Few universities have already shared their research databases with us. That information is now stored in the portal. So we are busy at the back end. We are creating communities of practice. We're also grateful to various science councils who are working with us and other data sources in constructing this portal, which we believe will be a huge resource to the system. My own vision is that this portal could actually outgrow NACI and become an independent entity in the future, if we think about its value and the role of data and information going forward. I say NACI is probably incubating, but this could become a huge entity on its own going forward. Probably the last 2 slides. This is an example of what colleagues has emerged out of that report that I referred to, the regional integration. So again, you know, you could see what we're trying to look at. For instance, looking at what we asked ourselves, what are some of the enabling technologies that could assist in promoting social inclusion in the region? And we've looked at broadband, mobile cellular subscriptions and broadband subscriptions, and so forth. And our own indicators report previously used to report on this. So we'll encourage colleagues to engage with this report. The last one. Yeah. Okay. So this is the last set of what the council has been able to do. The first one, I've indicated, we've produced a report. We'll encourage your feedback and input. Yeah, Dr. Jamini will be happy because every time you presented the indicators report and other people, VJ, they are here, people who have been extremely concerned with the pipeline constraints. And I'm sure all of us here that the pipeline conundrum is a big issue for NSI to grow and achieve its objective. We've said again, like we've done with business, that NACI can't constantly be repeating the same story, that our system is struggling to produce the requisite number of maths and science. We know government, the public, private sector, NGOs have been investing, establishing initiatives. The question we've been asking ourselves is why? And we have conducted this assessment. 2 days ago, we had a successful roundtable discussion engaging our draft report. This report is now going to be processed inside government, but we're quite confident, and based on the comments and feedback from stakeholders, how the content of this report, how it could be useful, not only to policymakers, but all those who have a vested in, or not vested interest, who have interest in seeing to it that our pipeline constraint is addressed. We've done the audit of the bioeconomy. We've submitted the report. We've completed phase 1 of this project on focusing on retaining local patents and technologies. It was focusing on the public side, but we have said, colleagues, include plant breeders' rights and then look at the private sector as well. Now, AI and RDI cybersecurity. Minister approved that in the current financial year, we should develop advice on what South Africa should do in respect of artificial intelligence and RDI cybersecurity strategies. And we are looking at RDI cybersecurity dimension deliberately, because government for years have been trying to develop a national cybersecurity strategy led by state security and a range of other stakeholders. We're not interfering with that process, but we want to build on what the old DST tried to do some years back. We have finalized the proposals on both the AI. The AI one isn't, we've looked at what the Presidential Commission on 4IR sought to do and recommend, and identify that what we need, South Africa needs an AI policy or strategy. And that's a level at which we are intervening, because our advice would center around developing a framework for the AI strategy. We're not looking at AI strategies. That's a responsibility of CSIR and other entities. So we are focusing on what policy could be achieved. And of course, we're mindful of, for instance, the announcement by Minister Nchabeni that they're setting up Africa, AI Institute. We will be in touch with them. The last point, colleagues, we've been engaging in international platforms. We've got partnerships that we have identified. Our chairperson, through the supports of DSI, ICR, has been actively involved in the AU-EU innovation policy, looking at agriculture and food nutrition, which they've done well. Myself, I've been on another AU-EU task team looking at issues of innovation policy, but we're also participating in BRICS. We've got a good partnership with the High School of Economics. We participate in the OECD as a committee, science, technology, and policy. These are just examples of partnerships that we've been participating. Probably the last one, Zai. So the question, because what I've shared, colleagues, it's what this outgoing council has done. Now, Anastasius, you should be able to pronounce this one, Kovadis, right? Well, I thought you were closer to Latin in the way you were. Okay, so let's move to the colleagues. We would like to share with you openly, and possibly if amongst you there are only DG will know whether they are potential new members of council. But this is what we foresee to be key focus areas that Naci would have to pursue. The first one, loosely framed as the renewal and the repositioning agenda of Naci. With what the white paper is saying about Naci, certainly the Naci legislation and the white paper says it needs to be amended. So the Naci mandate, the Naci role, functions will have to be rethought, defined. The thorny issue around Naci structural location, independency, and so forth will probably also form part of what would need to be discussed. The issues around resources, because the system needs to ask a question. If you give Naci all these functions to perform, does it have the capacity to deliver or to fulfill? And then all institutional reviews and systemic reviews, the last one being Hestel, they've all hammered Naci in terms of, to some extent, in terms of efficacy of advice, the utilization of advice and so forth. But we do recognize that it's an ongoing thing that we must constantly seek to enhance the quality, the relevance and efficacy of our advisory services. We've spoken about participation in the STI Interministerial Committee. That's in the white paper, but NACI needs to clarify for itself the role that it must perform there. NACI will be expected to institutionalize the M&E function which the white paper envisaged. Now, it's not as straightforward as maybe some may think, because you've got to think about different modalities of institutionalizing that M&E vis-a-vis other responsibilities that it needs to take, but also the foresight exercise, which the white paper says NACI needs to. So broadly, we're saying the institutionalization of these functions are important, and then continuing to advance the NSI transformation agenda, and then deepen the domestic, continental, and international partnerships. Chairperson, the last slide, just a thank you slide. Isaiah, are you still awake? Colleagues, if you please do visit our website, some of the reports that are referred to, you'll find them. In case some of you didn't believe what I was saying about what NACI. The last one, because we need to thank colleagues, but we also want to encourage you to access that book. All right? Don't laugh, Imran, because it emerged out of an initiative that NACI hosted in 2017. We hosted national advisory councils in South Africa. As a consequence of that, a decision that was taken in that meeting was that, the discussions and debates that ensued must be codified. So we will encourage colleagues to access. We thank you for joining us this evening and then tolerating my ramblings as we're trying to navigate through the council's reflections. Chairperson, thank you very much for your generosity.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and thanks to a well-presented overview of the work of NACI to date. We really thank you for your patience, and I think you would agree with me that the presentation by the minister and the presentation by the CEO of NACI is part and parcel of setting the scene for the discussions that we'll have in our colloquium as it continues tomorrow. With those few words, I want to thank you for your participation and for your patience in listening to us, but also to implore you and everyone else that's also participating online to continue with the discussion and engagements with us in this colloquium today and tomorrow, so that we enrich ourselves as NACI, but also enrich ourselves as a society. With those few words, I want to thank those that have helped us today to have this particular session, the Secretariat, our hosts, this particular hotel, and everybody else that has contributed to making it such a wonderful evening. And I'd like to close by asking the last item for us, who will then entertain us for the rest of the evening, maybe. And that is the introduction of a choir from the University of Pretoria called the Vocal Harmony. Thank you.
No, they're gonna take off they're gonna take down the chairs. It's not. Just don't know. Testing. 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 TikTok. YouTube. Yeah. Yeah.
So you guys are doing that. So you guys will.
I think it's all. zokuthola good. Yo yo yo, manje sanasana zokuthola good. Thola good. Yo yo yo, manje sanasana zokuthola good. You will meet me at the river. You will meet me at the river. Zongtalen Plamamanje, Yisagalan. You will meet me at the river. You will meet me at the river. Zongtalen Plamamanje, Yisagalan. Zongtalen Plamamanje. Zongtalen Plamamanje, Yisagalan. Zongtalen Plamamanje. Zongtalen Plamamanje, Yisagalan. Yazulu minyaka ngaboni. Yo yo yo. Yazulu minyaka ngaboni sogalan. Yazulu minyaka ngaboni. Yo yo yo. Yazulu minyaka ngaboni sogalan. Zongtalen Plamamanje. Zongtalen Plamamanje, Yisagalan. Zongtalen Plamamanje. Zongtalen Plamamanje, Yisagalan. Thank you, thank you. Stand by me. So the next song we're going to sing is Stand By Me, which is an arrangement by a popular group called Take Six. I hope you enjoy it. No.